Welcome to episode number 11. Can you believe it? From Ordinary to Extraordinary, where every single week this community meets together to talk about, obviously, how to move from ordinary to extraordinary. And you know what? Extraordinary is not just measured by the amount of money you make or how big your business is. It's about living an extraordinary life. You with me? And if you want to live an extraordinary life, if you want to do things that are different from the masses, you're going to have to think differently. And that's why every week we explore not only the psychology, first and foremost, but also the strategies of ultimate performance, of mastery, and of greatness. This topic today might just push your buttons. In fact, I hope it does. In fact, I'll tell you, my objective today is to make you uncomfortable. It's to make you maybe be scared. You go, all right, James, I'm out. Why would I want to do that? Well, actually, let me just say, it's not my job. I'm not going to make you uncomfortable. I'm not going to make you scared. I'm going to make you comfortable with being uncomfortable. You know, my objective is to hopefully make you comfortable with being scared. Now, we're going to jump into this, and I'm going to give you some counterintuitive ways of thinking. What else is new, James? And, you know, if you have questions, we got to some of them real time last week. I'd like to get some real time here today. Put your questions down below. And if I don't get to them in real time, then I always come back and I answer them, all of them. I just make it part of my schedule every single week to come back and to look at your comments and look at your questions. And so put them down there. Share this with your friends. You know, reach out to your community and bring them into this community if they are willing, if you're ready to make a difference in the world and to help them move from ordinary to extraordinary, to live an extraordinary, fulfilled life, which we all want to do. Now, here's what I want to ask you. You know, as people are rolling in here, I want to ask you if you feel like the world is changing around you, your world is changing around you, if things feel to be a little bit more difficult in your life today than let's say they were 5 years ago. Is your life a little more challenging, a little more difficult than it was 5 years ago? Not even, maybe 10 years ago. If it is, then just type yes. I'd like to know, because we're going to talk about that. Again, the question, as people are rolling in here, just let me know. Come on, give me some feedback here. Is your life a little more challenging, a little more difficult than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago? Just type yes or no if it's not. But my guess is that there's going to be some yeses, and Bear, you can let me know as people are responding if there are some yeses coming in. Yes. Can you give me some names of who's there? We got a new whiteboard that she's going to flip up behind the camera. We're big time now. We're going big time. While she's doing that, keep answering the question if you haven't yet. Just let me know. Is your life a little more challenging, a little more difficult, maybe a little more fearful, a little more uncertain than it was 5 years, 10 years ago from today? And while I'm waiting for the names who are saying yes or no, if you want to say no, let's see, Marta says yes, Garland says yes, Francisco, yes, you're in good company, Francisco, Garland, Marta, Darlene, me too. Life is a hell of a lot more difficult today than it was 10 years ago, especially the last 7 years of my life. If you know anything about what I've been through in the last 7 years, it's been a hell of a ride. But a hell of a ride is what it's all about. So let me quote Carl Wallenda. Now, maybe you've heard of Carl Wallenda. The Wallenda family is famous for being a high wire act. Carl Wallenda was the father, and he said, get this, write this down in your notes. Life is lived on the wire. Life is lived on the wire. The rest, he said, is just waiting. The rest is just waiting to live, because life is lived on the wire. Now, here's an interesting thing about Carl Wallenda. I read an interview of his wife, because as you may know, he fell to his death from a high wire accident. And so, some people may go, well, James, you're quoting Carl Walenda, life is on the wire, and he died. He fell off the wire. Yes, true. He went out doing what he loved. He went out giving it all to something that was crucially important to him. Now, of course, it's sad that he died, and I read an interview. Now, here, this is really critically important. Johnny Strange was one of these, have you seen these suits that people wear where they can fly? They jump off of cliffs and they fly through mountains, and, there's a webbing between their arms and their legs. It's a crazy, crazy extreme sport. Johnny Strange died, ran into a mountainside. A producer friend of mine is putting together a film about his life right now, and he knew, young guy, 20-something, he knew he was gonna die doing what he was doing, but he wouldn't quit. Now, the point is this, you've got to find something that you're willing to give it all for. Because you see, what you're doing right now, here's the fact, you're giving your life for what you're doing right now. You're giving your life for whatever you're doing right now. And, statistics tell us, research tells us, that 71% of the people surveyed are giving their life for something they're not even inspired about. They're not even excited about. They're disengaged from what they're doing. Let me go back to Carl Walenda's wife, because this is an interesting factor of his fall, and this is something that you need to understand and think about. She was interviewed, and she said, post his death as his widow, and she said, Carl was always, pushing the envelope. He was always thinking about how he could make it bigger, better, more exciting, how he could walk something that nobody else had ever walked. She said, it's interesting, though. A couple of months before his death, his fall, he had a nightmare one night that he fell from the wire to his death. And she said something shifted in Carl after that nightmare. She said he became consumed with safety. He's always checking how taut the line was. He was always making sure it was secured, totally secured. He was checking the balance of his beam. He was just consumed with not falling post that nightmare. Now, think about this. The mind cannot process a negative. If I say to you, don't think about an chocolate chip ice cream cone right now, then I know what you just thought about. You have to think about what not to think about before you know what not to think about. Now think about that for a second. You have to go inside and think about what not to think about before you know what not to think about. You have to think about what not to think about before you can even make sense of the sentence. Don't think about a pink elephant right now. You have to go inside and think about what you're not supposed to think about before you even know how to make sense of the sentence. You with me? The mind cannot process a negative. So if you're thinking, don't fall, don't crash, don't go broke, what are you thinking about? Interesting. So that brings us to the topic of the day. The topic of today is how to turn fear into fuel. And I told you, my job is to make you uncomfortable, actually to make you comfortable with being uncomfortable, to make you comfortable with feeling fear. A lot of people talk about fearless living, and I have two words for that. If you saw my Wednesday Wisdom video, you can go back and watch it, but I have two words for people who say there's such a thing as fearless living. I saw a post on Instagram yesterday where someone said, what fear? There's no fear. I have two words for that: bullshit. Those who talk about fearless living are the most fearful people on the planet. You know why? Because they're scared shitless of fear. They're full of fear about fear. They don't even want to feel fear. My job here today is to help you recognize that you're always going to have fear. There's no way to escape fear. There are 5 primary fears. I'll talk about that in a few moments. I'm going to give you 3 hacks, 3 tactics, as I always do at the end of this at the end of this presentation of how to deal effectively with fear. You're never going to get away from it. In fact, you know, you're going to be scared. If you're going for great, you're going to be scared. In fact, put this in your notes. If you're not scared shitless right now, you're not doing anything great. So every one of you, Marta and Darlene, and everyone else who typed yes, and anyone who's typed yes, I'll see you later. I'll come back and look at this if you didn't chime in right up front. You know, if you're feeling uncomfortable, if you're feeling fearful, good for you. Because if you're not feeling any fear, discomfort, there's no chance in the world that you're going after something great. Because put this in your notes. You are only comfortable when you're doing repeats. You're never comfortable when you're setting records. Does that make sense to you? That's so important for us to emblazon, to tattoo on the screen of our mind. You're never comfortable when you're setting records. You're only comfortable when you're doing repeats. So, you know, if you're not really frightened right now, uncomfortable, if you're not pushing the envelope, you're not going after anything great. You're not going after anything new. You're not going after records. You're doing repeats. Life is too short. You know, let me talk a little bit about one of my heroes, Elon Musk. Elon Musk, one of my heroes. You know, he founded Tesla. He founded SpaceX. You know, he wants to build a colony on Mars. This guy's got big ideas. Tesla, the first hybrid car that you want to be seen in. It's a good-looking car, right? He founded Solar City. Elon Musk is one of my heroes. Let me tell you a little about Elon Musk if you don't know him. There came a point in time after he founded Tesla where they only had 1 week of cash to cover expenses. They had enough cash on hand to cover 1 week of expenses. Now, here's another question I'll ask you. Have you been at that 1 week mark? You know, if you're an entrepreneur or you want to be an entrepreneur, have you ever been at that mark where you have about 1 week left of expenses, enough money in the bank to cover 1 week left, and you're burning down? You know, just tell me. Yeah, yes, James, I have been there. I've been there more than once. You know, and that's where they were at Tesla. Now, here's the story about Musk. He was a founder of PayPal, okay? And you've heard of PayPal. He founded PayPal, and it was his first company. It started off called Zip2. That was the name that eventually became PayPal, and they started that with $28,000 they borrowed from their dad. Okay, his dad. He borrowed $28K from his dad, and he started Zip2, eventually became PayPal. And 4 years later, 4 years after he started it, he sold that, and his personal take was 22 million. Whoops, I'm sorry. No, that was Zip2. That's why I have notes. Zip2 he sold 4 years later for 22 million. Now he immediately turned around. It's a good arc. 1 month later, that money into his next venture, which was XCOM. XCOM became PayPal. And so now he started Zip2 4 years later with 28,000. 22 million. He sold it 4 years later. Then he takes the money, immediately turns around. He doesn't bank it and go, oh, I got 22 million. I'm going to play it safe. No. He goes, what else great am I going to do? And he starts XCOM, which eventually became PayPal. And 3 years later, now he's setting a better record, he sold PayPal to eBay, who bought it for, get this, $1.5 billion. Now, Musk took $180 million from the sale of PayPal. Now, what would a lot of people do? Well, I got 180 million. Let me go drink margaritas. No. No, Musk is smarter than that because life is lived on the wire, right? He takes that money and he starts Tesla, he starts SpaceX, and he starts Solar City. And here's Musk, and I quote Musk. He said, I put 100 million in SpaceX. He wants to colonize Mars. 100 million. He put 70 million in Tesla, hybrid cars that are good-looking cars, and he put 10 million in Solar City. Now, what's that leave out of 180? That leaves 0. And Musk said in an interview, literally, he had to borrow money to pay rent. From 180 million to borrowing money to pay rent. Have you ever had to borrow money to pay rent? I have. I know that feeling. Now, you say, James, what's the point? The point is, at this time right now, as we speak, Musk is worth a reported $12.3 billion. $12.3 billion. And you know what? Why else he's a hero for me? Not just because he's willing to be on the wire, not just because he's willing to feel the fear, not just because he's willing to push the envelope, not just because he's great, which he is, but he also has a compelling purpose. He has a big heart. He's not doing it for money. If he was doing it for money, he would have taken the first 22 million and kicked back. He certainly would have taken the 180 million and kicked back. But it's not about that for Elon Musk. It's about more than that. And here's what he states. I'm going to quote. The goal of Solar City, Tesla Motors, and SpaceX revolve around my vision to change the world and to change humanity. He wants to reduce global warming through sustainable energy production and consumption. He wants to reduce the risk of human extinction, of the race becoming extinct, he says, by making life multiplanetary. Wow. And setting up a colony on Mars. That's a big idea. What's your big idea? What's your big idea? You see, it's a cold hard fact. If it doesn't take every single thing you have, money, time, effort, energy, if it doesn't scare the living shit out of you, you're not playing big enough. You're just not playing big enough. And you're most probably not up to anything great. Let's face it. If you're going to go big, and if you're going great, you're going to feel what I call the resistance. You heard me talk about the resistance before? It's those demons in your mind. The I can't. I'm not good enough. I'm not educated enough. I'm too old. I'm too young. What if this? What if that? The demons, we all have them. I have them. I collectively call those the resistance. If you're going after something great, think about the resistance that Elon Musk must have had. When they went to talk to Robert Downey Jr. about being Iron Man, about playing Iron Man, his first response was, I need to call Elon Musk because he's the real Iron Man. I happen to agree. But see, you can be Iron Woman, you can be Iron Man too, and the world needs you. The world needs a big idea. You see, we don't dream big enough. I remember when I was a young boy, 6 years old, I think, John Kennedy was saying, we're going to the moon. We had a big vision. We had a big dream. Now it's all about economics. It's all about building walls. It's all about, providing more jobs. It's all, not to say any of those things aren't necessary, but I'm telling you this, we need big ideas. We need big visionaries. We need you. What's your big idea? Musk has them. That's why he's one of my heroes. You know, if you're fearful right now, if you're uncertain right now, if you are uncomfortable right now, take it as a sign. Take it as a sign. It's a sign that you have some guts. It's a test of your guts and your grit. My producer, Bear, says Kyle wants to know what my drink is. It's kombucha tea. Kyle, does the body well. Check it out. Discomfort, fear is a good thing. You don't want to get rid of fear. You're never going to get rid of fear. You know, fear is a natural human emotion, and you want it. I mean, if a semi-truck is barreling down upon you and you're standing in the middle of the road, you better hope to God you have fear, or you're not going to have much of anything. Because fear is going to motor you out of the way. What we must learn to do, though, is to transmute fear. Big word. Transform fear. We need to learn to feel the fear, not suppress it, not compartmentalize it. But feel it fully and completely and allow it to motor you. Allow it to fuel you. So how do you turn fear into fuel? How do you become the Elon Musk of your industry? How do you become, even bigger than that? How do you come up with your big idea? Because it's all relative. It doesn't matter what you do, it's how you do it. Get your big idea. My big idea gets me out of bed at 4 a.m. every single day. I hit the ground running. I go to bed, I've left it all on the field. I feel tired, but I'm still inspired every day because my big idea is about worldwide impact. And it's not just because I'm a teacher and I can say that that's, or an author and I can say that's what I'm doing. You go, well, James, I can't do that. Yes, you can. You can make worldwide impact by becoming an incredible parent and training your child to make a difference, to think differently than what the current society is training him or her to think. I can promise you, I've been really, 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 really blessed. I've sat down with billionaires. I've shared a stage with billionaires, and I've gotten inside their mind. And what I know is that they're not going after the money. Elon Musk, if he was going after the money, he would have stopped at 22 million. You can do pretty well with 22 million. He would have certainly stopped with 180 million. You can be pretty comfortable with 180 million. Think about going from 180 million to having to borrow money for rent. It can't be about the money for him. It's about the meaning. It's about his purpose. It's about doing something great in the world. Saving the population from extinction. That's big. That's big. All right. You can tell I'm excited about this. I hope you are too. I told you my job was to make you uncomfortable today. My job was to make you comfortable with being uncomfortable. My job was to make you comfortable with being full of fear. Why? Because my big idea today is to get you to come up with a big idea. Are you thinking about it? Big idea. Right? 3 hacks. I'm going to rein it in here because attention span is about as long as the attention span of a goldfish in today's world. I'm glad you're here with me. Most people have the attention span less than the attention span of a goldfish. Most recent research tells us a goldfish has 9 seconds of attention span, and we have about 8. Think about that one. What do you do with hacks? As hacks, what do you do with strategies? Number 1, you have to understand fear. You have to understand it. I love language. If you know anything about me, I studied language. Look at the word understand, to stand under. It's a foundational principle. Understand. standing, right? Understanding. It's the foundation. When you understand where it comes from and you understand what fear is, then you're more equipped to deal with it. As I mentioned to you earlier, there are 5 primary fears that we have as the human species. My research, my experience has taught me this. It's not the purpose of today to talk about the 5 primary fears, but here's what I have my team do on the fly for you. If you're interested in understanding the 5 primary fears, if you're interested in learning how to overcome the 5 primary fears, if you're interested in learning on how to use that as fuel, to utilize it, to jettison you forward, and to achieve your big idea, then I have a real special for you just because you're part of my Facebook community. It's only for 24 hours. There's a link somewhere above my head probably. And, one of my most popular online programs is called How to Understand, Overcome, and Utilize Fear. It's got workbooks, it's got videos, it's got lessons, it's got an online community. You can go check it out. My objective here today is not to sell you, it's to support you. But for obvious reasons, it's one of my most popular programs. The normal investment on that is $19.97, but here's what I'm doing for you. If you're ready, if it's helpful for you, if you're someone who makes quick decisions and takes action, because it's only up for 24 hours, you click the link, it's 75% off. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say about it. It's 75% off. Click the link, pick it up. It's actually a little less than 75% off for the next 24 hours. If it's not for you, that's cool. That's cool. I'm not here to sell you. I'm here to support you. But what I will tell you first and foremost, first hack is that, and you have to put in a promo code Facebook, all lowercase. I think Bear put that up there somewhere too, floating above my head in Facebook world. But nonetheless, the first thing you have to do is you have to understand fear. You have to understand the 5 primary fears, and I'll give you the one major fear is the fear of death. The overarching fear is the fear of death. And you go, well, James, how does that apply to me going after my big idea? Well, because it's all a derivation of, if I go after this, then I may not make any money. And if I don't make any money, I can't pay my rent or my mortgage. If I don't pay my rent or my mortgage, I'll be homeless. And if I'm homeless, I won't have any food to eat either or any place to stay, and I'll die. Right? Now, of course, we don't think about that logically, but that's how it works. Second thing, understand fear. Understand it. Have a good relationship with it. Number 2, overcome it. Now again, let's look at the language. To overcome. Overcome is to rise above. So coming up and looking down upon it, if you would, metaphorically, you understand where it comes from. One of the 5 primary fears that you're experiencing, what brought that about in your life, what is causing that to spring up for you. You see, positive psychology tells us that 70% of the things that you're programmed with are limiting. Self-limitation turns into self-doubt. Self-doubt turns into self-betrayal. Self-sabotage. And so, when you overcome the fear, first you understand it. Okay, this is the fear I'm experiencing when I boil it all down. Now let me come up above it and understand where it came from, which helps me from a broader perspective to deal with it. And now I can utilize it. So that's number 3. Understand, overcome, utilize. Step number 3, utilize. How much time have we got, Bear? How long have I been going? I want to tell a quick story, and I don't want to make this go too long. Have you been keeping time? I got 11:30. So can I tell you a quick story? Hang tight with me, because it's going to really illustrate the point. A few years ago, I read an interview with Carly Simon. You might remember Carly Simon, You're So Vain, and she had a lot of hits. She was a great performer years and years ago. And she had horrendous stage fright. She was well known to just go into a panic when she was going to perform. And so much so that it would debilitate her. She wouldn't go on stage. And so they interviewed her. And they said, Carly, how do you know when you're going to have a bout of stage fright? And she goes, well, I'm backstage and I start to pace back and forth, and I know it's about time to go on, and my palms start to sweat, and my heart is beating rapidly, and it moves up into my throat, and I can't hardly breathe, and sweat's beating up on my forehead, and I just realize I can't go on. Now, at the very same time, they interviewed Bruce Springsteen. And Bruce was at the peak of his game. You may or may not be a Springsteen fan, but here's the thing. He was known as a stadium rocker, and Springsteen knows how to move a crowd. He was a stadium rocker, and, everybody else was playing these hour-and-a-half sets, and he'd go for like 3 hours, right? Because he was just the boss, they called him back then. And so they interviewed the boss in the very same interview. And he was like rocking it. These 3-hour concerts, moving a whole stadium, just, born to run, right? Born to be on stage. And they said, Bruce, how do you know when you're ready to rock? He said, well, I'm backstage, and I start to pace back and forth, and I realize it's about time to go on. My palms start getting sweaty, and my heart is beating rapidly, and it moves up into my throat, and my sweat's coming down my forehead, and I just know it's time to rock. Need I say more? How is it? Almost the identical responses from Carly Simon, Bruce Springsteen. How is it that one person's debilitating fear becomes another person's fuel? Well, I will submit to you that it all is in these 3 tactics, hacks, strategies I've given you. Understand it, overcome it, utilize it. You see, transmutation is the tool of mastery, not suppression, not denial, not stuffing. Not saying, let's be fearless. Let's have fearless living. Let's just switch the fear off in our brain, whatever. Fear, what fear? No. It's about saying, hey, if you aren't scared shitless, you're not doing anything great. If it's really frightening right now, I'm not telling you it's easy. It's not supposed to be easy. It's not easy for me. If it were easy, everybody would be great. It's not supposed to be easy. It's supposed to be meaningful. Get scared. Your job is to get scared. Jobs did it. Musk does it. Mark Cuban does it. Anyone. Not just business tycoons. John Coltrane used to practice, one of the greatest saxophone players of all time, practice until his lips bled. That's scary. Get scared to get great. Hope I've given you some things to think about. Make sure and put your comments. Share this with people who need. I personally believe, and I'm a little bit biased, that everybody needs to hear this message. Because there's too many people out there who are saying, there's no fear, and then we feel inadequate. We say, hey, what's wrong with me? Because I'm scared shitless, and that guy or that gal is not scared at all. Everybody needs this message. Of course, I'm biased, but share it, please. Share it if you care. Share it if it's made an impact on you. Let me help you. If you really want to dive into this topic and understand it, overcome it, utilize it at greater levels, next 24 hours, I got a great special for you, at over 75% off. And I guarantee you, every single dollar you invest in your own self-development is going to return to you 10 times over, conservatively. I call it my 1x10 formula. But again, if it's not for you, that's cool. Hopefully this has helped you. Put your questions down below. Put your comments down below. I appreciate you being here, and I hope I've given you some things to think about as always. Until we speak again, same bat time, same bat channel, next week right here on Facebook. Stay awake. Stay awake. When people say fearless living, stay awake. Yeah, go, okay. Right. Love life, all of it. The scary shit as well as the fantastic, exciting stuff, because it's all the same stuff. And be epic, because you are.